All right. Well, this morning, guys, our guest today is Mike Falkenstein. And I always get his name wrong sometimes. And finally, he told me it's Falkenstein like a good wine. Not that he knows anything about that or that I do. But like a good wine, we're going to have Mike Falkenstein with us today. And without any further ado, I'm going to ask him to come up and tell us a little bit about who he is, what he's done, and the ministry God has given him called 1-8 Catalyst. He's going to tell you a little bit more about that. And not only is he serving the Lord in the capacity with 1-8 Catalyst, he is also the author of 3 different books that have really encouraged people. And I'll let him come up and talk to you guys a little bit more about that and encourage you this morning on effectively loving and reaching those around you during COVID-19. And we're going to bring him on up here. Come on up here, Steve. Not Steve, Mike. Sorry. Yeah, I got to call you. See, I should have had Steve and Mike together. You guys.
That's right. That's right. And I would say that, yes, I would love to do something with Steve. You know, we already have a Facebook Live show of our own that we do called Missions Talk. And yeah, Steve and I think very similarly about most of this stuff. So
yeah, I keep calling you Steve. And I guess if I had Steve come, I'll call him Mike. So.
That's right. Well, Joshua, thanks so much for having me. And it's always a pleasure to be able to come on and share with folks about what we do. And then, of course, you know, it's great. This topic that we have for today is, you know, fantastic too, just because I do think that we have just a real unique opportunity to, you know, to reach out to neighbors who I know, at least in my own neighborhood, you know, after a couple of months of, you know, quarantine, we're all kind of ready to get out and, you know, talk to people that aren't our family, you know, not that we dislike our family. We love our families,
right.
But,
absolutely.
You know, just to be able to talk to some other people. So yeah, it's a very good topic, a very timely topic. So just a little bit about our ministry. So I direct a ministry called 1-8 Catalyst, and we exist to create resources and deliver training that is, you know, helping people reach their world for Christ. And so very long story about kind of, you know, how we got to that point. The short end of it is, you know, most of my ministry career has been impacting China. And so I've got a long history in China. So of the 3 books I've written, the first one is called The Chinese Puzzle. And it was just kind of here's what's happening in China, you know, 100 level kind of a book. And so as those projects that we were doing in China were ending, you know, God began to sort of lead us more towards kind of discerning, you know, we have all these unreached people groups around the world. We've got a Western church that has the opportunity to reach them. And yet, why is it that so many of these unreached people groups are continuing to be unreached? So kind of in my, you know, research oriented sort of mind, I thought, I'm going to do some reading and research about that. And God really led us towards, you know, really helping people make that connection that, you know, our lives in Christ go beyond just our lives in Christ, but he really is calling us to something more. Right. And so the books that I've written and the books that I've written for the ministry have really then focused on, okay, what does it really mean to be a disciple of Jesus? Because we know disciples of Jesus, people that are fully devoted followers, you know, are not people that are, you know, I really don't want to share my faith, or I have trouble with that. I mean, people that are completely sold out for Jesus are, man, I cannot wait to share with you, you know, what God is doing in my life. And so the first of the books is this guy here. I wrote a book called What You Do Shows Who You Are, the 6 Marks of a Disciple of Jesus. And so this is really intended to be a you know, a book that you go through with your community group or your Sunday school class or, you know, your men's group. Or so there are 8 chapters. Each of the chapters has 8 questions at the end that are really intended to facilitate you know, discussion. And so, because we all know that spiritual growth happens best in a group, right? That, I might be stronger in one area than you are, and we can go back and forth. And so I quickly followed that up with this guy. So I wrote another book, Keeping Watch Over Souls, the 6 Marks of a Church That Makes Disciples. This is really I don't know if you can see, but on the cover it says it's a book resource specifically for church elders and church leaders. And again, we're just trying to sort of feed into this idea that, man, what the church really needs is fully devoted followers, right? And so the book resources are all available on Amazon. If you want to go through those, you can purchase those. Then we have a number of, video type resources. I've got a podcast. I know, Joshua, you just mentioned that you listened to the episode I did with my good friend Steve. I interviewed him for the podcast. Stuff. So the podcast is called the Catalytic Podcast. And so that's available really anywhere that podcasts are available. And so, yeah, we're really just trying to feed into, the growth of the church. And, one of the really good things that has happened that God has done in our ministry, this book, this first of the 6 Marks book series, God has just completely done crazy things with it. So not only, obviously I wrote it in English, but then a year ago, I was in Indonesia teaching on the 6 Marks of a Disciple. A group of those Indonesian Christians said, what would it take to actually translate this book into Indonesian? And so we talked about that. That's now actually finished. And being ready to be published in Indonesian. Last September, I was in South Carolina at a missions conference, and an American missionary serving in Brazil said, what would it take? How could I get permission to translate your book into Portuguese? And so that's about halfway done. We've just started translating the book into Chinese, and I didn't intend for any of that to happen. So what God has done with that has been really cool. And so,
hey man, Mike, I was thinking of a very cool idea that maybe you and Steve can get on this. It would be great to have like a small group where we could just get on Zoom and actually go through that book as a small group on Zoom. That would really be something cool that we could get together and think about. That would be, I'm thinking about it. And then maybe we'll get together and throw that back and forth a little bit. But talking about today, you and I both had a heart's desire to reach our neighbors. And I've had that since I became a Christian. Reaching my neighbors for Christ became very important to me. In the neighborhood where I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. I know it's a small town. But everybody there knew who I was already, and they knew I was not a very good guy. So when I came to the Lord at 19 years old, I had a negative testimony that I was able to go door to door with the assistant pastor and meet my neighbors and introduce them to the new, improved Joshua Busby, who was saved by the grace of God. So I've always loved my neighbors, and when we moved to an apartment complex, we'd always find ministry opportunities, whether it was a puppet show or some type of way to reach out to our neighbors. So I've been thinking about reaching out to my neighbors, and some people might have that question: how can I do that? So, Brother Mike, in this culture of COVID-19 that we're living in right now,
right,
it may be harder to love our neighbor and to reach out to our neighbors. So. That's why when I asked you to come, you said this would be a good topic, and you told me about that book. So tell us about that book and a little bit more about how we can love our neighbor and reach out to our neighbor during COVID-19.
Yes, it's a very timely topic, and so I'm very glad to be able to talk about it. And I would say generally that yes, if you're looking for a good book on how to reach your neighbors for Christ, it's this guy right here. So this is a book called The Art of Neighboring, Building Genuine Relationships Right Outside Your Door. And so I would recommend any one of you to pick up a copy of this and go through it. And so it really is, at least as far as what I can tell, really the best resource on that, because really, you know, reaching your neighbors it goes I mean, it really is just as very simple as, you know, beginning to get to know them, get to know their names, you know, get to know who they are, and begin to ask their story. As they share their story, they're going to ask us, you know, about our story. And then, you know, from there, of course, Joshua, you and I can't talk about our story without talking about Christ. And so really that's kind of where that, you know, where that begins. And so in this period of COVID-19, I think there's some really strategic opportunities. And so I say at the beginning, of course, that, you know, we must remember first and foremost that anything that we do in relation to, you know, reaching our neighbors, we do kind of with this, you know, we want to follow the rules in terms of social distancing and follow the guidelines, you know, with public officials. But, you know, in light of that, I think there is a big difference between social distancing and, you know, social isolation, right? One of the things I'm starting to do is, you know, I can't meet with some of the people that I'm regularly meeting with in, you know, Bible study, but at least in terms of, you know, going to Corner Bakery or a Panera. But, you know, we've just started going to a park and sitting, and as long as we're 6 feet apart, we can still do that and still meet together. And so there is a difference between social distancing and social isolation, right? I mean, this idea of isolation negatively affects our mental and physical health. And so I think a lot of us have just experienced a very traumatic change in the amount of face-to-face interactions that we're having with people. And so in light of, you know, reaching our neighbors in terms of, you know, COVID-19, I think this does give us some really cool sort of unique opportunities to be able to build connections with the people that live, you know, right around us. And so a simple game plan in terms of reaching our neighbors in light of COVID-19, I think would be, I would give, you know, just a couple of ideas. So reaching out to our neighbors, you know, initially via email or phone, right? If you know their phone number or their address, you know, then, you know, reach out to them and, hey, just wanted to see how you were doing. Wanted to touch base. You know, if you don't have their information like that, a phone number or an email, leaving a note at their door and just explaining who you are, where you live, you know, so that they can get in touch with you, I think would be good. You know, I think also when you see people outside, make it a point to talk to them. You know, in this book, they talk quite a bit about just kind of being outside in your front yard and that being kind of a ministry opportunity. And then as you see people walking, you know, just being sure to introduce yourself. And, you know, with our ministry, we have you can't really see my t-shirt, but this is one of the Great Commission series t-shirts. This one says, keep calm and make disciples. We had another one that we were going to do. I really need to do it. And it's the logo on the shirt is simply, be missional today, walk your dog. And in fact, I just had that yesterday. I met 2 new neighbors yesterday as I was out walking my dog. And, you know, that's the beginning of, you know, being able to reach people.
You know, as you're talking there, Mike, there used to be a joke in the South that where all the bicycles are, you know, that's where all the people in the neighborhood were at. So,
right.
you know, as we got kids growing up, we could send our kids out to be neighbors to the neighbors, although cautiously with social distancing. That as you were talking, that little image came to mind of all the bicycles at one person's house, and
you're right.
You know, all the kids were there. That's where everybody's at. So
and that'd be a good place to be, right?
Yeah,
to meet
and making your house become that place where everybody wants to be, and that's
right.
a good thing to think about.
That's right. I mean, I think, you know, 1-minute conversations are a big deal when it comes to building relationships in our neighborhoods. And
Amen.
so, you know, I'll talk about it in a little bit, but Joshua, I had given you a link to a PDF that we've created. It's just called our block map, kind of meet our neighbors. But being able to start to write down that information and whatnot, I think is a good idea as well. So, as you're meeting neighbors outside and you're introducing yourself, just asking them, how they're doing in the midst of this crisis. I think we're all sort of processing this a little bit differently, right? And for many people, it's been probably harder than what it seems. Asking how they're doing, how their family is doing in the light of all these changes. How has this COVID disease, impacted their job in the midst of the crisis and, their company. We know that there's in the United States now at least a 25% unemployment rate, the greatest unemployment rate since the Great Depression. And man, it is just really affecting a lot of people. And so just to be there as a sounding board for your neighbors, it just really means a lot, I think. Asking them, if they've noticed any silver linings as a result of the adjustments to this crisis. And, with what Steve and I do on Missions Talk, it's been fun because what we're finding is, we've got a series of videos now that are asking different ministry leaders, how is this COVID affecting you? And while it has been affecting a lot of people, it's also, there have been some silver linings where it's like, actually, I think this is going to be a real benefit that we didn't see before. And I think people in your neighborhoods, may have that same thing. So you just asking them, is there anything that you need or anything that I could help with? And then, building a neighborhood directory, compiling information. Maybe this would be a good time for me to talk about this worksheet. And I've really taken this worksheet from the book, The Art of Neighboring, used with permission. Fortunately, the authors of this book, I'm in Metro Denver here in Colorado. They're also, they're on kind of the other side of Denver, but they're in a city called Arvada. And so I've interviewed them for the podcast and so gotten permission. But one of the things I really like is, let's see if I can show this, if it's going to show up. Oh yeah. So this is a worksheet that we've done. Oh yeah, you've got it there, Joshua. So this is just a worksheet that we're just calling our Who's Your Neighbor worksheet. And so the worksheet really is the 8 houses that are closest to your house, and it could be the 8 apartments closest to you, to begin to write down what you know about those neighbors. And so the 8 boxes represent your 8 neighbors, and then there are 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3. 1, you're writing down their first and last names, what you know. On box number 2, or on point number 2, you're writing down what you know about each person in the household. So this would be things like, if you've spoken to them a couple of times, do you know where they grew up? Are they, what they do for their job? Do they play tennis? Do they, do they have a father in the Korean War? Whatever you know. And then to number 3, write down some in-depth information that you would know about, that you would know after connecting them over time. And it's interesting because I think the author said that for point number 1, just their first and last names, their experience is that only about 10% of those that have filled out this worksheet can actually name the first and last names of the people that live closest to them. 3% then know more information. And then for point number 3, only 1%. And so what is cool about this, of course, is that what's really cool about this, of course, is that a couple of things. If you don't know the names of your neighbors, this gives you an excuse to know them, right? And get to know them. Number 2, then, once you know their names, then you can begin, and put this on your fridge and just begin praying for your neighbors, by name. And it's amazing what God does then as you begin praying for these people by name, right? So I think, Joshua, you have a link to this for people to be able to just download it, print it off, and begin to use it. So as I sort of end sort of this, some of my thoughts, I would just say, there are some kind of fun things to consider, right? Consider what you may call a virtual meetup. As you get to know your neighbors, host a virtual gathering of your neighbors. Consider hosting one of these meetings, like on Zoom or Skype or whatever, and just have particular topics in mind, right? Parenting, marriage, etc. Having sort of a neighborhood, and we've seen some of these videos on Facebook, right, of these neighborhoods that are, each family is out in their front lawn, properly social distanced. They each bring their own food, and kind of a neighborhood sit-in, right? Have everyone bring their own chairs and their own drinks. Be sure everyone's sitting social distanced appropriate. But then you can have a nice conversation and get to know them. And here's what I'll bet you, if you offered that to neighbors, you'd have neighbors that would want to do that. And perfect time of the year. It's getting warm in some of our locations, and sit outside in the evenings and just talk and just kind of get to know each other. And you might even, if you've got friends that they're taking walks with their dogs, you might even say, hey, can we take a walk together? And you're staying that 6 feet away. And the thing to remember that I actually realized, this whole business of staying 6 feet away is actually not that far away. Like, you can easily have a conversation with someone else if you're 6 feet away, right? and so yeah, Josh, I would say,
what are some ways that we can reach maybe those that are elderly or those that have underlying conditions, because we don't want to expose them to the virus, but
that's right.
We want to reach out to them. So what are some ways we could do that?
Yeah, I would say that, obviously, offering them help in any way. Is there any way I can help? And so this could be just a knock on the door. You're staying, you're 6 feet away, and just say, hey, listen, I know that, you might need some help. Is there anything I can do? I have a good friend here in Denver who was just telling me he has I think he's a 90-year-old neighbor across the street. And so he has become, for this 90-year-old neighbor, kind of the helper in terms of, okay, the sink needs to be fixed, or the doorknob is loose, or, those kind of things. And that just means a ton to them. So the other thing might be that you might have some older people that in your neighborhood who just literally don't know how to use this technology. And so when it comes to meeting on Skype with their grandchildren, they wouldn't know how to do that at all. And so, offering help there. Obviously, offering, to run errands for them, and just setting a reminder on your phone, of course, to check in with them on a regular basis. And so all of this, and maybe I can conclude with this, but, all of this is really to, I have a phrase that I've been using for years, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I really do think that that's true. And so as people know how much you actually really care, and that care, of course, is coming from your love of Christ and what he's done in your own life, that just kind of spills out into, your relationships with your neighbors. We don't want to just ever leave it there. I mean, that's not the end purpose. The end purpose, of course, is you're hoping that they're then asking you how, why are you doing this? And then that gives you an opportunity, of course, to share the reason for the hope that you have. Again, Amen. 1 Peter 3:15, right? And so, so that's where having a testimony and being able to share, it's important. Being able to share a simple gospel presentation. Again, if you don't know how to do that, I would highly recommend it. And if you've practiced it, believe that, and people are asking about that, it's just going to roll right off your tongue because you know it. So So Joshua, hopefully some of that's helpful.
Some people see reaching our neighbors as like a project, and I don't want people to think that. 'Cause I love that you said that it's our heart for Jesus and our heart for them that leads us to do these things. We're not just trying to shove a track in their door, you know.
Right.
We really care about our neighbors and we love them and we don't want to see harm come to them.
That's
And
right.
not only on this earth, but we don't want to see harm for their eternal soul. So it's
That's
very,
right.
very important. And as someone who is in one of those underlying condition categories, it has been very beneficial. The church members that have went and picked up our friends that went and picked up our prescriptions from the CVS and brought them to us. They go and pick up our Walmart orders. So there's a lot of ways that you guys can be neighbors to people in my situation. And me and Christina were thinking about this yesterday, Brother Mike, and we're thinking of some other ideas. And Christina came up with sending them a card, put a card on their door.
Right.
Put them a gift basket together of hand sanitizer and wipes and the stuff that they can't find in the store, and knock on the door and, you know, stay social distance and give that stuff to them. Just practical ways to love on people, and then
it means a lot.
And you get to build a relationship, and maybe one day you get to share the gospel with them. And it's just it's great stuff, Brother Mike. Thank you for sharing with us.
You bet. My pleasure.
Good stuff, man. I appreciate your heart and your ministry. And once again, guys, he's from 1-8 Catalyst. You got a website, Brother Mike? Maybe just tell them what the website is.
Yes. So you can go to 18catalyst.org. The 1 and the 8 are spelled out in word form. So you can probably see behind me our graphic here, but it's 18catalyst.org. You can find out more about what we do. Joshua, again, I think, did you include the link for my little worksheet for them too?
Yes, I will. The thing about StreamYard is I am not allowed to write comments as it's going through. I don't know why.
So maybe after
that, yes, I will post that in the description.
Okay.
I forgot to do that this morning.
Because it is a great tool. And again, if you don't know the names of your neighbors, it's certainly hard to reach them for Christ, right? So beginning that process of writing down what you know, and
you're like, hey, what's your name? Hey, how are you?
Yeah. Right. That's right.
Yeah, one thing here, we live in Parley Complex, and there's a maintenance man that we have, and my son always sees him out and about. And we know him as Antonio. We got to know his name, so we just start say, "Hey, Antonio." You know, we live on the 3rd floor, and one day he was sitting out on the bench down on the sidewalk downstairs, and we just say, "Hey, Antonio." So it's good to know their name. And one thing I've learned, Brother Mike, and you probably learned this too, people love to hear their name. I mean,
they really do.
Because it makes them see that someone knows me. They care about me. Wow, this is cool.
That's right. In fact, that's one of the things I like most about, when I go shopping and people will have their name tags, they have to wear, and I'm always looking at it and, calling them by name. And I do think people like that. And then for me, if it's a store that I shop at a lot or often, I want to remember their name. And I think you're right. I think people like being called by their name. Of course, I think we all do. So that's just another little thing you can do.
That's a conscious thing you can do. Like if you go out to dinner, don't go in the restaurant right now. Sorry, this is not making a political statement, but probably going inside the restaurant is not a good thing to do right now. But, when you order food and they got a name tag on, make sure you say thanks and say their name.
Right.
And that just makes them feel warm. I'm not trying to feel all warm and fuzzy, but it does make people feel good. And right now with COVID-19, people are not warm and fuzzy. They are feeling scared, vulnerable. And when you just say that simple, well, thanks, Veronica, and smile and, have a great day, Veronica, or Bob, or whatever the name is. So.
That's right.
I guess Veronica, that would be California or something like that. So give us a Coloradian name. What's a good name from Colorado?
Something like Bodie.
Cody?
No, Bodie with a B.
B-O-D-Y? No, that's Bodie.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very sort of, Colorado mountain sort of name, hiker, climber, skier kind of guy.
Or you could be from Alabama with a name like Josh. And there you go.
That's right.
Well, thanks for coming, man, and sharing with us your heart and your love.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'd love to come back anytime.
And we'll have you come up in just a minute and lead us in our prayer time. So stick around for just a few minutes as everybody writes their prayer requests down. And make sure you guys check out that website, and I'll be posting that link to that resource that Brother Mike has provided for us, so how we can effectively love and reach out to our neighbors around us. I'll post that later. So if you have a prayer request, go ahead and put it in the text down there. It's time for prayers. And this is a real awesome time that we get to share together on the Morning Motivation. So prayer requests, go ahead and lay them on us down there in the text.